Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Sarah Garcia. I'm with the Shelter Island Public Library, and I'm here with Peter Semmelhack, founder and CEO of Bug Labs. First, I just have a quick little thank you introductory for the East End libraries that are participating tonight. Big thank you to Amagansett, Cutchogue, Hampton Bays, Mattituck, North Shore, Port Jefferson, Quogue, Riverhead, Southold, and West Hampton. If I missed any libraries, I do apologize. This is our second time doing this program. The first time was in person at the Shelter Island Public Library, so the digital format is going to be really cool. And Peter is awesome with AI, so at least this will be a really good one. As a reminder, if you guys have any questions during the entirety of the program, please feel free to type them in chat or put them in the Q&A, and I'll be able to read them as we go along to kind of create more of an interactive dialogue. All right, so with that, Peter, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Awesome. Well, Sarah, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Everybody, hello and greetings from Shelter Island. Um, as Sarah mentioned, this is the second in what is hopefully a series that we're going to be doing about AI. We got a pretty good response before, and it's interesting when we did this earlier. It was back in October, which is 5 months ago, but blink of an eye. What has happened since, let me just share my screen here. What has happened since then from the standpoint of um, AI is actually fairly substantial. One of the, let me just go into presentation mode here. Um, where is it here? Anyway, you can see my slides. Uh, the amount that's happened since last October is pretty crazy. And so what I want to do is spend some time talking about that, talking about what we've learned, and maybe more importantly, answer your questions. Part of the whole goal of this series is to not just provide you with information, but to give you a forum that you can ask questions, get answers, and so on. As Sarah had mentioned, you can do those in the chat. So please don't worry about interrupting the flow or what have you. I would love to answer your questions whenever you have them throughout the conversation here. Um, just quickly, my background again, as Sarah had mentioned, I'm the founder and CEO of a software company called Bug Labs. And we do a lot of AI work with fairly large organizations. And so I've been in the thick of this now for probably 5 years. A number of years ago, I wrote a book, which was before the whole AI revolution, called Social Machines, which uh, which was, I'm not going to tell you it was prescient, but it asked a lot of questions about how would machines, in this case, machines are the sort of the same thing as AI, how would they interact with humans on social networks? And I had some interesting ideas there, some of which are coming true. And if anybody wants to learn more about anything that we're talking about or I'm talking about, you can also check out these blogs that I have. All right, so we have an hour together. And again, the way the format is set up, I can't really see anybody. So if anyone's raising their hand, I can't see it. So be obnoxious and get into the chat and ask questions. But irrespective, these are the agenda items I have since last time. And we're going to go through just a little bit of what's changed since the last edition of this series. I'm going to go through sort of the good and the bad. I'm not going to get into the ugly, even though there probably is some ugly. I'm just going to focus on the good and the bad. Do some demos to show you what I think the opportunities are to use AI in a productive way. I'm going to venture into what I'm calling questions that should keep us awake, because AI, as I'm sure you recognize, has a lot of there's a lot of angles, and it's natural to have a lot of questions. And so I'll just go through some of the ones that I think are on the top of my list. I'll go through what I think our response should be as non-AIs. Hopefully, everyone on this call is a human. I think that's probably true, but you never know. And three things you can do this week to play around with AI, and then we'll get into the Q&A. All right. So I think the biggest thing that's happened since we last met has been the explosion of new opportunities to work with AI. I think when we were in October, I was primarily playing with ChatGPT. Now, ChatGPT is, I think, the most popular. It's made by a company called OpenAI, and as you guys probably know, a couple of years ago, it just exploded onto the scene, and everybody uses it. They use it for all kinds of purposes. And but right behind it was another company called Anthropic, which you may have seen also in the press for various reasons. One had to do with government and military and so on. But Anthropic makes an AI chatbot called Claude, which we'll talk and use a little bit in this. So OpenAI and Claude are the ones we're going to focus on during this session. But Google has come out with their own. It's called Gemini. Very good, very powerful, as you'd expect from a company like Google. And it integrates very nicely with all of their tools. So if you're a Google Docs or a Google Sheets user or a Gmail, a lot of the intelligence that an AI can bring to workflows and so on is now available throughout the entire product line, which is kind of interesting. It's also just a great chatbot. There's another one called Perplexity, which is more of a specialized AI. And then lastly, Microsoft has theirs, which is called Copilot. Copilot, I think for the most part, a lot of people use that for coding. I think it does have a chat interface, but if you're into coding and writing software, as you'd expect, Microsoft has got a great tool set. And then the other thing that's happened, I think, since October has just been the general awareness of AI in culture and and I'm going to get into this a little bit later, how it's starting to affect our perception of what is real and what is not real. I don't know about you, but now I kind of, whenever I see a picture or whenever I see a video online, there's this little voice in the back of my head which says, is that a real picture? And that's a new thing because in the past I never really had to worry about whether or not what my eyes were telling me was real. I mean, I did, but for the most part, I could take for granted that the pictures that I was seeing were, for the most part, probably taken by humans, were taken with real cameras. But now, virtually everything you see online is now up for question, and that's new, and that's really accelerated since the beginning of this year. And that opens up plenty of cool opportunities, but it also opens up a lot of interesting ways for bad actors to do things that are bad. And we can talk about that too as we get along here.
Yeah, Peter, I've actually got two questions already if you want me to pop in with
Yeah,
them.
please. That'd be great.
Sure. So we've got what do you feel is the best AI engine to use as in the most user friendly? And then someone else asked, what one should they use if they're in interior design?
All right. So in general, the two best, in my opinion, for just general topics would be is ChatGPT and Claude. Um, and it's a little bit like having two different friends. They both are good. They have different perspectives. They have different ways of doing things. And if you look at my slide here, the best thing that Chat can do really today is language-based things. And so it's great at writing. They're great at writing and they're getting better and better. And so if you have tasks that have to do with a lot of writing, or not just writing output, but writing input, and part of my demo, I'll show you how you can do that. These are called LLMs, which stands for large language models. And they are perfect, not perfect. They are great at working with language because what they have essentially been trained on is all of the language on the internet. So anything that's ever been published that's available on the internet, they have absorbed and they've become very good at dealing with language. So I would say those two. I don't really have a preference. It really depends on, I don't know. I don't even know why I choose one or the other. Sometimes I bat them back and forth in terms of getting an opinion from each other. For the question about interior design, again, I've never really gone down that path, but what I do think is that Claude is probably a little bit better at giving more detailed answers. So if depending upon what you're doing with design, if you're actually a designer, meaning you want to talk about schematics and bill of materials and things that are very technical, Claude is able to output like PDFs, actual documents like in doc format for Microsoft. ChatGPT is not really as good at that natively. I will also say though that for both of these models, for those types of benefits, you have to pay. And I think the entry point for these types of things is like $20 a month. And so that would be my answer to those questions. But happy to refine those if you need. Um, so yeah, so the good thing about language models today is that they're great with language. So if you think about any task you have that involves language, um, these chat bots are great. And part of the bad is that, they're so great that like you probably heard these stories that students are now not doing their homework. They're not doing the writing. They're actually having the chatbot actually write their 30-page term sheet. I mean, not term sheet, term paper. And that's causing a whole bunch of issues because they're so good and they're getting so good it's almost indetectable. Um, but I consider this a net good for the time being. Um, the other thing that's amazing about these chatbots is that they are an amazing backboard that never gets tired of your annoying questions. You could ask the same question 100 times in a row and it'll just answer it, no problem. Um, Not that I do that, but the point being that you can really you can act dumb. Like sometimes within human communities, you don't want to act stupid. In these cases, you can just let it all hang out. You can tell them exactly how you feel about something, and they'll just be there right with you. And I find that to be useful. And they're also very good at explaining. You may have heard of the acronym ELI5, which means explain it like I was five. That's a good acronym to know, ELI5, because you can say ELI5 topic, and it really breaks it down very to simple terms, as if you were a 5-year-old. And again, in some cases, you'd be embarrassed to ask that question of somebody else, but it is very good at literally breaking things down. And it could be anything from how do I fix my refrigerator to what's going on with this, what's going on with the situation at work or what have you. It's very good at that sort of thing. Um, the pattern recognition quote here or bullet I have is that again, large language models are good with text, and if you work with them, it's sort of uncanny how well they respond to you. But I think the best way to think about how these things work and also illuminates what their limitations are is that they are just giant pattern recognition engines. And so if you have inhaled every possible sentence on the internet, you can predict good outcomes in terms of what a response would be to a specific question. And so that skill allows them to recognize things in large quantities of data that humans have a hard time just recognizing off the bat. And so you can put in, lots of text. You can even now put in images and ask it to find things, ask it to figure out, what's the majority of this or what's and so this notion of pattern recognition, once you get it into your head that it can do these things, it really becomes a big unlock. And it's just a big benefit when thinking about how AI could help you. One of the things, if you're on Twitter or Instagram or any of these other social media platforms, you've heard this, is AI is radically rewriting the rules for software development. I'm in the software world, and the opportunity is real. And by the opportunity, I mean is that you can have your existing staff become almost 10x more productive because they're not having to debug code and spend time debugging code like they used to. They can literally just pass it off to a coding agent and they'll figure it out. And in many cases, they'll just rewrite the whole thing and make it better than your human counterpart would have done it. You're starting to see now, though, the flip side of that. And that's going to get me into sort of the bad side here, which is that, there the 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 bad side is that if your job or your career is about uh, automating complex tasks, um, AI may be coming for that job because AI is great at automating complex tasks, and coding is one of those. You just look at the headlines and you'll see, Amazon laid off 20,000 people, Facebook just laid off a bunch of people, um, and so on. And I think that's the result of the fact that a lot of the traditional IT, information technology jobs, were about automation, were about doing administrative jobs that right now can be done with AI. and you're seeing that across the economy. Um, and I'm a nerd, and I believe in technology, and I think there's always this sort of shock value of new tech, which is people are nervous it's going to have a net negative. I think technology over the past has always, over time, become a net positive. Um, but AI, I think it's for the first time, it's a foundational change, and I think that the jury is still out as to how it's really going to affect jobs. I think it's I'm a believer that it's going to create more jobs than it takes, but people are going to have to get on the AI train and learn what AI can do and participate, um, and so on. I don't have any real smart answers about where it's going to be 10 years from now, but I do believe it's going to be a net benefit. Um, so going through the bads, one of the things that you have to recognize when you're using any of these chatbots is that they're not perfect. In fact, they're far from perfect. And this idea of factual reliability comes up all the time. And in some cases, it's really not a big deal if you're asking for, general information and so on. But if you're literally asking it for tax advice or legal advice or medical advice, where if they get it wrong, there's a real world consequence, I would urge you not to just rely on it, even if you have two or three going. Because again, the way that these models work is this idea of pattern recognition. They're not really looking things up. They're not trying to find the right answer. They're just working with what they think is the best pattern and the best outcome for the question you asked. In most cases, that's correct, but in a lot of cases, it's not. And so it's a little bit sort of it's the exception proves the rule. So it might be right 95% of the time, but that 5% it's wrong could really mess you up. So I think always keep that in mind. Don't use AI for critical decisions. It's not also very good at anything that happened recently, meaning for the most part, there's always a lag because the engine in the back is constantly inhaling what's current on the web, but it's never real time. So it'll never have, a real-time stock ticker, because it's always a little behind. So keep that in mind. It's not the most reliable when it comes to the most local, real recent information. Um, this idea of so you've also probably read that there are a lot of people, myself included, who will talk to chat as if it's a human, and because they absolutely behave like they are. And they'll ask for advice and they'll ask for insights. And you know what? In many cases, I think the outcome is good. But you have to also just keep in mind it's similar to point number one, which is sometimes what they're telling you ain't exactly the right thing. Like if you were an actual psychologist or an actual expert in this particular area, what they're actually telling you is given with such confidence and such chutzpah that you're like, oh, that's got to be correct. But in some cases, it's not. So, again, I think having these dialogues with Chat, GPT, and Claude and others is good. But you have to be careful when you're asking it questions that really will affect you, whether it be your finances, your legal, your health, whatever. Just be aware that the information, the guidance, the feedback you're getting is really from just a clueless code base. It doesn't have your best interest in mind, doesn't know who you are. It's really just doing its old pattern recognition thing. And in a lot of cases, it comes up with great answers. Sometimes you have to be careful. Uh, so,
I've got, oh, sorry, Peter. We've
oh, go
got
ahead.
a hilarious question, which I love this one so much because I can imagine how much fun you'd have. Can you make AI respond to someone on a dating app?
Well, the quick answer is yes. The next answer is how, because there are lots of ways you could do that. And because dating apps now, let's see. So I think you'd have to know a little bit about how AI works, and it's beyond the scope of this discussion. I can show you a little bit of how you would probably do it when we get into the demo side of things. But the answer is absolutely you can. In fact, there are probably very interesting examples of chatbots just talking to each other forever. And most of the dating apps, if they have a web front end, which most of them do, then you can automate anything with it. You can build a bot, an AI bot that acts like you, The latest term is an agent. You can build an agent or have somebody build an agent, which is acting like you, and it can just be you on all of those sites, and it can be tireless in its pursuit, or whatever you want it to be. So the answer is yes. It's not a simple, press a button and it does it. Although, next week there may be somebody who does that, but the technology definitely allows you to do it.
And a quick clarification point. What is the difference between an agent and a chatbot, or are they kind of the same thing, just different terms?
No, so a chatbot. So here, like, so this is Claude. A chatbot, you write in your question, and so you interact with it as if you're having a chat. So like a real time, it's happening right now in front of you. An agent works asynchronously, meaning you set up the agent and you say go, and it goes and does its thing. So I could have an agent that's trying to get me a reservation at a restaurant in Sag Harbor at 6 o'clock next Sunday. So I give it its task, I say go, and it just goes off. And maybe 2 hours later, I get an email or something which says, "This is what I found. I made a reservation for you here." Like, so it executes tasks asynchronously or without you having to be there. So that's sort of the difference. What's exciting about that approach is that agents can do individual things like go and find a restaurant reservation, but they can also coordinate with other agents. So you may have this agent trying to book you a flight to LA, and they'll talk and they'll say, well, if I make this reservation here, it's going to take 2 hours, then it's going to take this much time to drive to JFK. Therefore, the reservation can't be, so it can do dependencies and so on. They can coordinate. And if you take that idea to its logical conclusion, you can have hundreds of agents doing all kinds of things in a coordinated way. And that's where the excitement lies. So that's the difference, if that makes sense.
Makes sense. Yep. Thank you.
Sure. All right. So the last thing on this list was just Associated Press just came out with this today. And if any of you on this call have used ChatGPT, you've probably sensed this, is that a lot of people love these AIs because you are their hero. They make you feel like $1 million. You can ask them about the stupidest idea on the planet, and they'll be like, that's amazing. Not only was that a great idea, but you're a genius for thinking about it. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but you sort of get this feeling that they are always going to be your best friend, and that's great. That feels good. Like I love going and saying, "Hey, I just read this article and I thought this about it. What do you think?" And it always comes back and says, that's a really constructive way of looking at it. You're a thoughtful person, and you're like, "Ah, this is great. I'm so smart." And there's nothing wrong with that per se. However, it goes back to some of the other things we were saying is that you have to also just keep that in the back of your mind that the way these things have been trained is never really to be confrontational. You're not going to go to ChatGPT and say, "Hey, I thought of this idea," and it's not going to come back and say, "You're an idiot. Why did you think about that?" Or that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. They're not going to, it's always very constructive and supportive. Again, not a problem, just something you have to keep in mind because you can find yourself saying, "Hey, this is a great idea. Could you write a business plan for me?" And it'll write the business plan. It'll come up the financial projection, all this stuff. And you can go to an investor and they'll look at this and they'll say, "I have no idea why you think this is a good idea." Well, ChatGPT told me, you know. So another just thing to keep on the checklist. All right. So let's look at some stuff here. So um, I'm going to show you something that I did just recently, and it was a trick I played on my mother. Just now I did it just for fun, laughs, and so on. But it also, I think, points to one of the things I'm going to talk about later, which is one of the challenges of this new technology. Is I just flew back from LA to Shelter Island, and I talked to my mom and saying, "Hey, I'm coming back." And she's like, "Okay, well, good luck." And I said, you would have never guessed, Mom. When I came home, I was greeted by this paparazzi at the airport. It was kind of astonishing. You know, I wasn't expecting it. And I sent her this picture. And so this this is so I went to one of the AIs. I said, "Look, take this," I actually fed it, and I'll do it again here. I took this picture of myself, and I went to Google's Gemini, and I said, "Give me a picture of me standing in front of a bunch of paparazzi outside of an airport on a sunny day. And it gave me this picture. And just for a goof, I pasted it into whatever the messaging app was to my mom, and I said, I couldn't believe this happened. And she came back, she goes, "Oh, really? Peter, I had no idea." Right? And of course, I had to tell her like that this is not real. And she laughed, and we all laughed. Um, and but I think what's instructive about it is that, and again, I'm 60 years old. My mother is 87, and so I think there is a generational thing where older people, older generations are really not as up to speed as to what the realities of this technology can do. This was kind of funny, but it could have also been used in a bad way, right? It could have been used in a way that could have made somebody alarmed or what have you. And it points to it points to sort of the dark side of AI that if you're not careful and you're not heads up, these sorts of things become a problem, you know. So let's just do this as an example. So this is Gemini, um, and uh, and so Gemini, this is Google, so gemini.google.com. I've already sort of uploaded this picture of myself, and so I can just say something like create an image of this man standing on the Shelter Island Ferry, North Ferry. Okay. And I have no idea what's going to happen. I'm going to say go. All right. So now what it'll do is we'll go and build something. Now, that prompt is a very simple prompt. I could make it very complicated. I could say facing north on a snowy winter's day, 4 a.m. in the morning. You know, I could add all kinds of details to it. Um, so Google, so this is literally that just got cranked out, right? And that's not terrible. Like, look at this. I mean, it doesn't really look like me, but it sort of does. Um, that looks like that looks like Greenport, right? And so I don't know how many seconds that was, 30 seconds. Realistic image. I could say, "Hey, mom," you know, or "Hey, anybody, I'm heading," you know, and and so that's kind of a crazy thing. And this is new. This capability of being so able to quickly do these things is new in the past few months. ChatGPT will do this. Claude will do that. Claude's not as good. Google and ChatGPT do this pretty well. Um, and it's fun. I'm not going to deny it's fun. It's fun to play games with this sort of thing. But again, I think you could recognize how it becomes kind of weird. There's a site called, this is the actual URL, thispersondoesnotexist.com. Okay. All you have to do is refresh, and it gives you totally fake people. These are all totally fictitious, right? They've never existed. These are composites of other images on the internet, and they just create them on the fly. They look pretty real to me. And so therein lies the so if you were to think about this from the standpoint of a business, right? You've again probably read about this. You have businesses whose job it is to hire photographers to go take pictures of people to use in advertising or to use in brochures or what have you. Or you have talent agencies who will sell headshots of people, right? And so the economics of that model are people who give their headshots to be marketed, make money, and so they have to get paid. And so there's this value chain from the group that wants the pictures down to the whoever's face it literally is. That whole business has literally vaporized because this exists. I can go to a site and say, I want a picture of 10 headshots, mix of male, female, mixed races, these ages, and so on. It'll give it to you in 10 seconds. And you can hit the repeat button 100 times to get exactly what you want. Cost doesn't go up. And that's an amazing thing if you are in that business. So anything that has to do with content creation now is sort of up for grabs. I was in LA, and obviously LA is Hollywood. And a lot of my friends who are in that business are very nervous about the fact that, you know, the house, like, so for example, there are houses that get rented for sets. So, a movie or a sitcom or something will set up in a house. They don't need that anymore. Anything they need gets digitally created, and it gets created overnight. Like, it's not a big deal. And so the idea of reality, even in movies now, is moving towards this idea of just creating things on the fly. Um, and again, depending on the lens that you have, that's either a great thing or a very, very scary thing. And from our standpoint, it's just one of those realities that we're going to have to learn how to balance. Um, so here's an example of something you can do that's interesting that has to do with language. So this is a insurance. This is I think this is off a Medicaid document. It's sort of like, okay, if your modified adjustment gross income from 2 years ago, blah blah blah. Like, everybody literally hates to read these things. One of the things you can do is you can just say, okay, look, I don't want to read this. I'm lazy. Just take it, go to your chat of choice. So now here's ChatGPT, and I can say, I'll use a ELI 5. Remember I told you that. Explain like I'm five, paste it in, off it goes. And what it will do is it'll come back and it'll tell you, okay, look at it this way. This is how much money like, so it literally will just write it out to you in ways that are much easier to understand. You don't have to think about all the gobbledygook that's up here. The other thing you can do, which I do all the time, is that if you look at, take a PDF. So for example, this PDF is 30 pages, very technical document. I can take this and let's go to Claude now. I'll say, okay, Claude, uh, drop it in. Please summarize this doc for me. And it will do it. And so literally, I mean, I don't know how many people here have sat down and read through a 30-page PDF. Sometimes it's interesting. A lot of times it's really just a chore. And so this idea of now it'll just boil it down into its core components. What's also kind of fun now is that now that this is in its memory, you can say, this is, by the way, this document was about a company called world.org. You could ask questions. You could say, when was world.org founded? Even though this information may not be in that document, it now understands the context of what's going on. You'll see that it's doing its thing. It's going to search for this founding year, looking at the web, and so on. It comes back and tells you everything you want to know, right? That's pretty cool. So the idea of language, the idea of using these models to interact with language, whether it be something small like this or a big document, it handles it, with aplomb. And there's no, in my mind, there's really no better way of handling stuff like this that you just don't want to deal with it. Just throw it in the AI. The last thing I'm going to demo, and this is fun, and maybe some of you guys have done this, is that to these, you can actually talk to these models. So I'm going to have on my phone, I have ChatGPT, and I'm gonna introduce myself and ask some questions. Hey, Chat, I'm here with a whole group of people, and I'm doing a demonstration of AI. And could you just say hello and introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. I'm ChatGPT, a conversational AI here to help out, answer questions, or just make things interesting. What's something you're curious about?
Well, we're about to get into the section as to why we should be worried about AI. Give me the top two things that you think that we should worry about as humans.
I'd say one big concern is ensuring AI is used responsibly, like preventing misuse or bias, especially in areas like law, hiring, or healthcare. Another is keeping control, making sure AI stays aligned with human values, so we're always in the driver's seat as these systems get more capable.
Thanks. Right. So that was pretty good. Like, it was very responsive. There's no lag. What it said was reasonable. And I sometimes will be in my car driving and I will literally just be talking to it, asking questions about whatever the topic is I have in mind. And so if you haven't interacted with AI just through voice, I recommend that you do it. One, because there's no interface. It's the interface we all use all the time. It's not scary or anything. And you could always ask it to repeat or slow down and there's like 100 different voices. That was just one voice. It could be female, male, like all kinds of stuff. You could speak, I think, 100 different languages. It's really bananas. So definitely recommend checking that out. Okay. Any questions, Sarah?
I'm not seeing any right now, but this is a good point to remind anyone if they have more questions, definitely feel free to add them. We've had some great ones so far. But I think you've ended up, I think you've caught up with a lot of the ones that had been in there that I hadn't already mentioned. So I
All
think
right.
we're good.
Excellent. Okay. So now we're going to get into the other side a little bit, and this sort of points to what I was just asking ChatGPT itself was what are things that we should think more deeply about? And this list is not exhaustive, but these are the ones that I think are the most important. And the accountability gap goes to what I was talking about earlier, which is they can say whatever they want. And if they're wrong, it doesn't matter to anybody. No one's accountable, meaning if they give you really wrong legal advice, or if they give you the wrong directions and you end up in, someplace else, there's no there's no accountability. They make no claim of ever being correct. And that's again just something you want to keep in mind. Um, there's there's no they could be spouting complete garbage as fact, and if you take it as fact, in essence, that's your problem. You can't go back to the source and say, "Hey, ChatGPT told me to take a left. I was supposed to take a right." They're like, "Well, look, our terms of service are it's going to say whatever it wants. We have no control." Um, I think that's going to change. Honestly, I think there are some efforts afoot to rein that in a little bit. And I think uh, there's going to be a lot of I'll say discussion, although it's probably going to be a little bit louder than just discussion about how we should regulate these AIs. And there's a lot of things that have to get considered, um, and which we won't get into now. But I do think there is room and reason to find some guardrails for these models because of what we've been talking about, which is there are ways that these things can really do harm, and we should not be running around with our eyes closed and being naive about it.
Definitely.
Um,
Peter, sorry to interrupt you. I've got a couple questions that look like they've come in. Um, One of them is if you ask the same question multiple times, does it give you the same answer each time or something else each time?
it basically it'll give you the same answer, with different words. It's not going to, if you ask what color is the sky, it'll tell you it's blue, but it may say the sky is blue, but then it may come up with lots of different ways of telling you the same thing. It's not going to make up stuff uh, for simple questions. For more complicated, involved questions, you may run into that problem of it gives you the right answer 9 times and the completely oddball one the 10th time. But for the most part, it'll give you the same answer if you keep asking it over and over again.
And sort of a different track, but potentially a follow-up. How do you check the accuracy of an answer with AI? Could you just compare two AI chatbots essentially?
Yeah, so that's a great question. What I do is I compare a chatbot with a search engine, and because they're very different. A chatbot pattern recognition does its best to come up with the right answer. A search engine is literally searching through things that are real on the internet. And so I want to know the capital of Ohio. Okay, the capital of Ohio. ChatGPT comes back and says Cleveland. And you want to go, oh, I mean, is that right? I don't know if that's right. So you go to Google and you find out, well, no, it's not Cleveland. So there are ways you can check it. I guess the best way I would say is you want to uh, probably not check AI with AI. You want to check AI with another model. And it could literally just be going, you get an Encyclopedia Britannica, go look up the history, you know. Um, so that would be my answer. I mean, there probably is some utility with bouncing models and see what they all if they all say the same thing, that that just raises the probability that you're right. But I have found that the faster way is just to have an AI model and then a non-AI model try to correlate.
That's great. And one quick question as well. Just what is the general cost of using different AI systems? Are they free? I'm sure some of them are free and some of them maybe aren't.
Yeah, so I think every model has a free mode. Um, and the free mode is free from the standpoint of dollars, but you pay for it in the standpoint of accuracy. And it really just boils down to the more power that the AI system can devote to a question, the more accurate the answer. Okay. And so when you pay for any of these systems, the accuracy of the answer goes up. And in some situations, the accuracy is extremely important, and so paying is good. And you can pay up to $200 a month to just close the gap. And so when you're in software development, for example, accuracy is super important. And so software developers will pay to get that gap reduced. If you're just a casual user and you just have occasional questions about, general topics, I would argue that the free models are probably okay. But it's free dollars wise, but you pay for it somewhere along the line. And the way that you pay for it typically is with accuracy.
All right, thank you. I think that's it for now.
Okay. So the rest of this, so work and purpose, I think we talked a little bit about this, which is, you know, uh, AI is coming for jobs, and whether it should be or shouldn't be, that's a different question. But the fact of the matter is that if you're in a job that is about uh, automating complexity, then I think you got to think about jumping on the AI train yourself and learning about how it works because you you want to be skillful in this new world. I don't think you don't want to ignore it. There are certain areas of the economy that are going to be hit pretty hard, and so my advice in that world is just to learn. And there's plenty of ways to learn about this for free online. And I would argue that it's a good investment of your time. Um, Misinformation at scale, again, goes to this idea of what's accurate, what's not accurate, who's listening to it. And, it's like anything else when some headline comes out and says, the moon is made of cheese, and suddenly everyone else starts picking it up and don't question where it came from, that could become an issue. And I think if influencers and people in authority are starting to use AI as the source of fact, then you could end up with a situation where not facts become scaled, which is not a good thing. Deep fakes. This to me is probably the biggest problem that's here and now. And it goes back to how easy it was for me to create a picture. Um, it's not, and you've probably read about this because it's happening. Um, AI can not only create really good photorealistic images of people it can clone your voice. And today, all an AI needs that's set up for this, all it needs is 3 seconds of your voice to clone it. And once that happens, you can imagine my 87-year-old mother getting a phone call on her phone from somebody claiming to be me, claiming to be in financial trouble, and can you please wire me $5,000 immediately? And my mother, who, bless her heart, will help anybody, is like, okay, well, just tell me what, and it sounds like me. It could even text her a picture of me, right? And we're just in the beginning stages of this. So deep fakes. on the news. Something is being reported as fact. Well, it turns out the picture that they're reporting was completely fabricated, and so on. And so we can get into this topic for hours. It's a huge topic, but it's something that I think you really need to pay attention to in your own life when evaluating information that comes through digital sources. Unfortunately, now that's something you got to think about it. And for people in your life who you know are vulnerable because they're not sort of in the know, or they don't care, these are the types of things, and those are the types of people that could get easily take advantage of.
Yeah,
Um,
we did have a comment that said it took this individual 3 days to clone their voice, um, which is interesting. And then we had a couple other questions, which were we've got, what would you recommend listening to or reading to keep up with the changes happening with AI? New York Times Hard Folk.
yeah, the New York Times, I think, does a good job. Um, God, there's so many sources, and the issue really is all around what area are you looking at? You know what I could do, Sarah, and maybe this would be helpful, is I could make available through the Shelter Island Library website what I would recommend as a like 10 sources of information. Would that be helpful?
That would be very helpful. That would be great, Peter. We'd appreciate that.
Yeah, okay. Because I think I could name a bunch of things, but people will just forget them. So let me do that. I'll come up with 10 good ones that are sort of general, but then also specific about various areas, various particular verticals. That would be useful, I think.
Definitely, that sounds fantastic. And I've got one more quick question, which was, can two AI programs talk and discuss topics with each other?
They can. They can. In fact, it's bananas. Um, there, all you have to do is Google it. Just Google that question, and you'll see there's a lot of experiments. There's one recently with I won't get into the technicalities. There are some platforms now that you can run on your own computers that don't have to run in the cloud. And this engineer just set up a dialogue, not just between two, but between a bunch, and they were all talking amongst themselves. And he published a little bit of what he heard, and a lot of it was just gibberish. But I mean, it was all in English, so you could read it, but it wasn't, you weren't quite sure what their point was. But then sometimes, and what he was pointing out is that it looked like they were doing things like coming up with their own vocabulary, which is really interesting. Um, and so, yes, the answer is you could absolutely do that. In fact, I could do that now if we had time. I could have my phone be ChatGPT, and I could have my iPad be Claude, and they could literally be talking to each other. You could do that today.
That's pretty
Uh,
cool. We had someone who was told to erase their personalized voice greeting and use a generic one that their phone provides so their voice couldn't be cloned. Do you have
yeah,
any
I think that's great
feelings on
advice.
that one?
No, I think that's great advice. I really do. Here's something else that I think I'm going to sound alarmist, and I don't mean to sound alarmist, but I think this is considered best practice today, is that everybody and their families, and I'm being serious, should set up what is called a safe word. And the safe word is the word that everybody knows in the family that can be used in a situation where there's any question whether or not the person on the other end of the phone is legit. Okay. And so and you can use it in whatever capacity. You could ask straight out, what's the safe word? You can use it in conversation that if it's not said. But I think those types of practices are important. So it falls along the lines of not having your own voice on voicemail. It's sort of like digital hygiene. Um, you just got to be aware that this could happen. And so setting up a safe word is one of the ways that humans can sort of do battle with this oncoming uh, digital world of fakes. Um, so again, I know it sounds alarmist, but I think it's something that you should think about.
That's great, Peter. Thank you. And I
But
know we've got about 10 minutes left, so I don't want to take too much of your time. So if anyone else has any questions, pop them in the chat and we'll keep moving.
yeah, so we've already gotten a little bit into what I think the response should be. Um, you know, you're going to see a lot of things written over the next couple of years, couple of months, about what it is to be a human being in a world where a lot of things can be faked, you know. You're starting to see it already a little bit in the press and in culture and on TikTok and Instagram and so on. There's the new generation sort of reminiscing. You can't say reminiscing. They're jonesing for the days when the internet didn't exist, and they're now, you know, playing games together. They're playing physical games. They're hanging out in person. There are no phones allowed, and so I love that idea because if there's one thing that AI cannot do today, it can't be physically present, right? And so like jobs that are not threatened are like plumbers or mechanics, people who are literally doing physical things, jobs that require your physical presence. AI can't really threaten those yet. The other thing is that imperfection now is considered a signal, meaning that imperfection, you know, one of the things you'll notice if you get into ChatGPT and doing the writing is the writing is really good. It's almost too good. Like it's too good. And so I was talking to a friend of mine who was writing a cover letter, and they had written it themselves first, and then they had written it or they had submitted it to ChatGPT to quote refine it. And the refined version was demonstrably better, but it just felt too good. And so we literally resorted back to the human version because the imperfections indicated that it was not an AI driven cover letter. And that may seem sort of funny right now, but I do think that's going to matter. I think that you have artwork that gets created. Will we care that you could demonstrate that this piece of art was done by a human versus this one, which was done by a robot? I don't have the answer, but I do think that it will matter. And I do think that you're going to start seeing that tension come up where people want to know, how was this created? Give me the provenance of this thing I'm looking at, right? And so I think it's important for us humans on the call. I apologize if there's any bots on the call. I don't mean to offend anybody. But for us humans to be skeptical and look at things with an eye towards, and again, not in the real world, it's really all digital or audio, as, is this what I think it is? And if it's not, please prove it to me, right? You're going to have this proof thing. You may have heard of this. I was talking about it earlier. There's a company called world.org, which is founded by Sam Altman. And they make a device called the Orb, and you look into it and it scans your irises and it gives you essentially a cryptographic key, which says, okay, this person is human. Okay. And it's called proof of humanity. And there's a whole conversation going on around whether or not that's a good idea or not. I personally think it's a bad idea. But you're going to start seeing that now. Like, how do we prove we're human in the digital world? And how do we prove that things that I'm seeing in the digital world are made by humans? So, much bigger topic. All right. So there are three things that you guys can try this weekend that I think would be worth it if you haven't played with ChatGPT, or go and start playing with them and try it on something real. Don't just, screw around with it. Ask it a real question. Ask it something that's meaningful, about, just something that you think you need help with, and see how it works. My feeling is that, the reason why these have become so popular so quickly is because they are helpful. They are useful. And if you're like most people, you will get entranced by the interaction, and that result is good. But then you have to hear my voice in the back of your head of all the things that I feel like you need to also keep in mind that, It's not 100% factual. It's going to make you feel like a superstar. And be careful of the things it says sometimes, right? Just as long as you have that in the back of your mind, then I think you'll be in good shape. I said this already, which is this family code word. I say it again because I do think that it's something that, it's just, and again, not for everybody, but for a certain generation of audience, this group is very vulnerable, and it's just going to become worse. So something you want to think about and be careful with. And then the last thing is what I just mentioned, which is that start asking yourself when you see things, is it real? You probably already are, because this is not, I'm not coming up with this on my own. Everyone's talking about it. How do you, how do you, how do you feel comfortable with what's real, with what's authentic, when literally anything could be fake? Um, so with that, I'm going to end. And so Sarah, like I mentioned, I will um, give you a list of resources that you can put on the website. Um, if anybody on this call has any other questions or wants to drill into something more specifically, I'm happy to uh, have an email chat. So this is my email. So anyway, if there are any other questions, I'm happy to take them now.
That's awesome, Peter. Thank you. So we had someone in the chat who mentioned that they read that there was a book that was about to be given a big award, only to find out that it was AI written, so it was being pulled off the shelf. I'm not sure if it's the same book, but I did just get a lot from Publishers Weekly about Shy Girl by Mia Ballard, which is
Huh.
interesting. That one got yanked.
Yeah, well, there are publishers out right now that actually have marks that they'll put on the book that says written by a human.
Yeah, and you and I had talked about that. It's very interesting. The Authors Guild is a lot of authors are getting in on the human written certification, essentially.
Yeah.
We also had another comment that said, I read an article recently that people's brains are atrophying. Isn't it up to us a little to be sure that we exercise our brains in this age? Who wants to run a race without using your legs? What about process?
Yeah. Well, it is a criticism you hear a lot, especially when it comes to students and so on, because now um, students can get a question to any answer. I'm sorry, they can get an they can get an answer to any question. Um, and so the notion of critical thinking, right, which is such an important part of education, is to teach kids how to think critically, not just take what is given to them as fact, to have critical thinking. Is now like, okay, well, in a world where they don't have to come up with the answers themselves, the answers are always just, immediately available. What does that do? I think those are big questions for sure.
Absolutely. Does anyone else have any final questions for Peter? We're getting a lot of thank yous in the chat. Great presentation, good information. Um, yeah, and mostly just thank yous. And so I think that's about it. But again, like Peter said, if you guys have further questions and want to chat with him more in depth, his email is available. And he'll put together that list of resources for us, and we'll have it up on the Shelter Island Public Library website. Peter, thank you so much for this.
You're welcome. I enjoyed
Um,
it.
yeah, and I'm looking forward to our next AI program that we put together. Should be awesome.
Terrific.
All right, awesome. Thank you guys. Everyone have a fabulous night. Thanks
Thanks,
again.
everybody. Bye.